What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MI Gardener channel. It's a brisk one today, almost coat weather, almost. It's about 54 degrees, so it's pretty chilly for just a long sleeve shirt, but you know what? I put the coat away. I said, I'm not pulling that thing out until this fall. So I'm out here freezing my buns off for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This one's gonna be a fun one because we're actually talking about a kind of a hot topic right now for this time of year, which is hardening off seedlings. We get asked a lot, how do I harden off seedlings? Should I harden off seedlings? Which seedlings should be hardened off? And just anything hardening off related. So that's what we're gonna talk about. So the first thing is, what is hardening off? For those of you that might never have heard this term before, hardening your plants off basically means acclimating them to the sunlight. You might think to yourself, what do you mean acclimating them to the sunlight? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The thing is if you have them in a grow room in your house, those lights that you're growing them under, regardless of how strong they are, I mean, they could be the strongest grow light commercially available. You bring the plants outside, the sun is going to be 50 to 100 times stronger than that grow light that you have. Even on this day, which is super overcast and real cloudy, it's still stronger than any grow light you're going to have in your house. So what happens is when you have your plants inside, or even in a greenhouse, like a nursery that's using like polyplastic or shade cloth, things like that, you might walk into the greenhouse and think it's just as bright as it is outside of the greenhouse, but it's not the case. A lot of the sun's energy is actually being filtered through that plastic or reflected off of that plastic. Sure, some still comes in, but the plants notice that. And the plants have built-in mechanisms to protect themselves from the sun. Just like you and I put on sunscreen, they kind of put on sunscreen. It's actually a protectant that they build up over time to protect themselves against the harsh sun. But when it's indoors, that sun protectant is actually it's not nearly as thick and it's not nearly as strong because it doesn't need to. The sun will actually burn the leaves, and that's what we want to protect against. Sun scald or sunburn, they're both kind of the same thing, two terms that are tossed around a lot. Sun scald is where your leaves get really silvery, really thin, and it just looks like fried or burnt. That's caused from the really strong sun. And so because the plant has not had a chance to acclimate to the strong sun, it just fries, just like your skin does on a really sunny day if you sit outside the whole day. So the next question is how do we harden off plants? Basically, the long-standing tradition has been kind of, it's like the spring ritual. Bring the plants out for 2 hours, take them in for the rest of the day. Bring them outside for 4 hours, take them inside for the rest of the day. And then you're gonna get the point, 6 hours out the next day and in for the rest of the day. In 2-hour increments until you get up to about 10 hours, then you can leave them out for the whole, pretty much for the whole day, because of the fact that the sun is really only strongest during peaks, during the peak sun hours, which are about 1 to about 4. So, anytime in between there, you're pretty safe. You want to get them through that kind of long period of sun, and then they're pretty much fine to leave outside for the rest of the day. And that's why it's such a long process. It's 4 to 5 days sometimes to get your plants fully acclimated. But there's a but. And what if I told you that this was actually a really easy way to harden off your seedlings with far less hassle? Because I'll tell you what, I hate bringing my plants out and in and out because I've got a lot of them. I've got a ton of plants to bring in and out. The last thing I want to do is do that each day for a whole week. It's just really annoying. What I like to do is I like to leave my plants in the grow room under the lights until I have some overcast days like this. The overcast days, sure, the sun is still far stronger than any commercially available grow light you're ever going to find. However, it's not strong enough to cause leaf burn. So what I like to do is I like to wait for these days right here where they're nice and overcast. I seize that opportunity and I leave my plants out for the entire day. And to prove that, I'll go get some of the plants that I have in the garage that I'm going to pull out for the rest of the day. So these are the plants that I've been hardening off for the past 2 days. We've had 3 days of overcast weather. The one day was too cold to bring the plants out, so I didn't want to risk them dying. So I brought them out yesterday, I'm going to bring them out today, and then tomorrow is going to be overcast as well. 3 overcast days, I can leave them outside the entire day, and that usually equals about a whole week of hardening off. It's going to get them acclimated to the wind, it's going to get them acclimated to the sun, and it's also going to get them acclimated to the temperature, because the temperature inside is far more different than it is outside. You don't want any form of stress. So what I like to do is I like to keep them outside just during the day when it's the warmest, because obviously springtime weather is usually a lot colder at night than it is inside. We're talking like low to mid 40s versus inside we're in the low to mid 70s. And so there's a big temperature difference too. So I'm getting them acclimated to all three of those things. One thing you'll notice is when they start hardening off, you'll know that they're properly hardened off when the leaves are very, very thick. You see, when they're inside, the leaves are not as thick because the plant leaf actually will be very thin, much like you can see this leaf here. Show you this leaf. See how thin and droopy that is? I wish I could take a thickness of this leaf. Compare that to this leaf. You can see, hopefully you can see, it's about 3 times thicker, believe it or not. And what that's doing is it's actually building up its sun protection. The sun protection is essentially a thicker leaf because the thinner leaf is the stuff that's going to burn. These might still burn on a really bright day. These might still burn because of how thin they are, but those older leaves, they'll be fine and they'll be long gone. It's these new leaves that I want to protect. These are the ones that are just coming out. So I'm protecting these by hardening them off, by hardening the plant off, and I'm doing that by just leaving them outside during an overcast day. It's really simple, and that way I don't have to worry about, if I'm at work, do I have to come home? Oh no, I forgot, it doesn't really matter. I just wait for those overcast days. It's a perfect combination. Now, what do you do? What do you do if you have overcast days and then a sunny day in between? Like let's say tomorrow is a sunny day. What do? Really simple. If the day is really sunny, I'll set the plants out during the morning for the morning sun, and I set them in a way that I can tell where there's a shadow right around 1 o'clock. Remember I said that the peak sun is at around 1 o'clock to about 4 o'clock. So I don't want them to get peak sun. That'll fry them and it'll definitely cause harm to the leaves. So instead I actually kind of scope out the area, see where there's going to be a shadow at around 1 o'clock peak sun, and then I make sure that that shadow is still existing at around 4 o'clock. A great way to do this is to use your house. Your house is a wonderful block of sun, or a shed or a barn, anything like that. And then when they get sun in the morning, they're going to get sun all the way until that shadow forms. And that's going to be a great way to get them just a decent amount of sun, but not too much. Because again, in the morning, the sun is lower in the sky. That means that the angle of the sun is a lot less direct on the plants, meaning that the risk of sun scald or sunburn is going to be far less. So I really hope that you guys will use that tip as well, because it really does help. I have never had a huge issue. There's only been 1 year where I've had an issue with sun scald, and it was because I just kind of rushed the process. Like I said, I typically prefer about 3 days. 2 is kind of pushing it. That 3rd day really helps to just kind of, it helps to ensure that they're going to be a lot stronger. Now the question always does come up about rain. What if rain's in the forecast? I love rain. I love rain so much in early spring, and there's nothing better than leaving the plants out during a nice spring rain. As long as it's not really cold rain where it's going to shock them, that's totally fine. I left my plants outside yesterday. It was raining. It was about 51 degrees, I think, and it was an awesome spring rain. The plants just greened up. It got all that dissolved oxygen from the sky, lots of nitrogen and things like that, that actually helped to green up the plants. So they got that as well. So they got a little bit of a fertilizer just from sitting outside, and they also were not accustomed, they were also not being exposed to that strong sun, and they're getting accustomed to the growing conditions. So it's really a win-win situation all around. The final thing I want to talk about are which plants should you harden off? And we get this question a lot is, are there any plants I can just move directly outside, or are there any plants that I don't have to harden off as much? And the answer is no, not really. In fact, all of them need to be hardened off. Some actually need longer than others. I usually say the bare minimum is about 3 days. But what you want to do is you want to let the plant tell you if it's hardened off or not. Again, look for those really rigid, really green, really sturdy leaves. If you don't have that yet, you might need a couple more days, or you might need a day, and just, again, let that plant tell you, because it happens really quickly once you get them outside. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making is moving their cold weather stuff out. In fact, it has happened to us more frequently with our cold weather crops than our things like our tomatoes and peppers, typically because we're very careful about those. We really baby them because they take so long to grow. Whereas our cold weather crops like lettuce, broccoli, cabbage, things like that, I hate to say they're kind of a dime a dozen, but we tend to throw them out a lot quicker because they're like, oh, they can handle the cold weather, throw them out. those are actually the ones that I typically get sun scald on more frequently because of that. You throw them out kind of willy-nilly, you think they have nice, thick, healthy leaves, and you think they're gonna be fine. They're typically not. So those also need about 3 days of hardening off. And that's why I said there is not a single plant that I would not recommend hardening off. I also recommend hardening off even if you get from the greenhouse, like I said. The benefit to getting them from the greenhouse or a nursery, obviously you're not starting them from seed, I get it. I prefer if you do start them from seed because you're gonna save a lot of money and you're gonna have the sense of satisfaction of growing it yourself. But if you get them from a greenhouse or a nursery, I typically say about a day or two is all you need to harden them off. You just wanna get them outside, away from any cover where it's gonna be filtering the sun, and that way they can harden off a little faster and a little better. So that's really all there is to hardening off. I'm gonna bring the rest of my plants out and we're gonna get them all ready to go in the ground. It won't be long. One final tip for all of you that's really gonna help out is make sure not to set your plants right on the ground. I always take my plants and either I put them on a card table or I set them up here on my wood rack here, my wood pile, because I don't want them right on the ground. Being on the ground does two things that's very risky. One is cold temperatures. The coldest air is closest to the ground. And so if you can elevate them even 1.5 feet off the ground, there's about a 3-degree temperature difference. That's a huge difference when it comes to just the amount of stress that your plants are going to be kind of acclimating to. Temperature stress, sunlight stress, and wind stress are 3 big stressors. So if you can help reduce the amount of stress from temperature changes, it's gonna help out. Also, we're gonna get some radiant heat bouncing back from the house that's gonna help to kind of keep the plants even that much warmer. So really helps out to reduce the stress. And then the final thing that helps with is being out of the, being out of the reach of hungry mouths. I can't tell you how many times people have written to us saying, I put my plants outside and now something's eating them. What am I going to do? I can't even get my garden started and I'm already a target. And that's because they're young seedlings. Young seedlings are tender seedlings, and pests, regardless if it's a slug, a rabbit, a mouse, it doesn't matter. They target the youngest, tenderest plants because they're the most nutritious. So if you leave your plant leave your plant elevated until it can kind of get hardened off and start growing strong before you move it into the garden, it can be a little less susceptible to being eaten by pests. So I hope that helps. I hope these tricks and tips really get you off to the races and get your plants hardened off. I hope you guys enjoyed and I hope you learned something new. As always, this is Luke from the Am I Gardener channel, reminding you to get out there, grow a garden, grow big or go home, and we'll catch you all later. See ya. Bye.